My name is Sierra. I'm 32 years old, and the best birthday present I ever gave myself was a set of hidden cameras. I'd been planning for that moment for 3 months, knowing my husband would eventually lose control at my birthday party. When his hand connected with my face in front of 40 witnesses, I didn't cry. I laughed. Before I tell you how one slap freed me from 6 years of hell, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you believe in fighting back, smart not hard, because what happened next proved that revenge is a dish best served with evidence. I'm 32 now, but this story really starts 6 years ago when I was 26 and stupid enough to believe Garrett Hayes was my soulmate. I met him at a networking event in downtown Austin, Texas. I'd just opened my interior design business, Desert Bloom Interiors, and was desperately trying to make connections. Garrett walked up to me with this confident smile, introduced himself as a sales manager at one of the biggest real estate companies in Austin, and I was hooked. He was everything I thought I wanted: successful, charming, attentive. He sent flowers to my tiny office every Friday. He took me to dinner at restaurants I couldn't afford on my own. He listened when I talked about my dreams of building a design empire, or at least I thought he listened. We got married after a year of dating. Small wedding out in the hill country, just close family and friends. I wore a simple white dress I'd found on sale. He looked handsome in his navy suit. I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. The first year wasn't terrible. We bought a 2-story house in the Hyde Park neighborhood, 3 bedrooms, a backyard, original hardwood floors that I spent weeks refinishing myself. I decorated every room with love, thinking about the children we'd have, the life we'd build together. Year 2 is when the cracks started showing. Garrett suggested we combine our bank accounts to make managing finances easier. I agreed without hesitation. Why wouldn't I trust my husband? That's when the questions started. Why did you spend $40 at Target? What did you even buy? Do you really need another pair of shoes? You have plenty. How much did you pay for groceries? That seems high. Every purchase scrutinized, every dollar questioned. I started feeling guilty for buying myself coffee on the way to client meetings. I'd make up excuses for why I needed new work clothes. The worst part, I convinced myself he was just being financially responsible. Then he started with my friendships. My best friend Quinn had been in my life since college. We'd grab lunch every couple of weeks, go to yoga classes together, share everything. Garrett hated her. Quinn talks too much. Why do you need to see her so often? She's divorced. She'll poison your mind about marriage. You're spending too much time with your friends and not enough with your husband. Slowly, I saw Quinn less, then barely at all. Same with my other friends. Garrett had an opinion about everyone. Iris was too bossy. Natalie was flighty. David was clearly interested in me romantically, even though he was just a client who'd commissioned my biggest project. By year 3, I was isolated. My family lived in California, too far away to visit often. My friends had stopped calling after I'd cancelled plans one too many times. My world had shrunk to just Garrett and me, and that's exactly how he wanted it. The public humiliation started around then too. We'd be at dinner parties with his colleagues, and he'd make jokes at my expense. Sierra can't cook to save her life. Thank God I didn't marry her for her kitchen skills. My wife has the worst sense of direction. I have to drive everywhere or she'd end up in Oklahoma. Everyone would laugh uncomfortably. I'd force a smile, pretending it didn't hurt, telling myself he was just joking, that I was being too sensitive, but each comment chipped away at my confidence, my sense of self-worth. The first time he got physically aggressive, I was 28. I'd stayed late at a client's home, helping them finalize design choices for their living room renovation. When I got home at 9:30, Garrett was waiting in the kitchen, fury radiating off him. Where were you? I called you 3 times. I explained about the client meeting. He didn't believe me, accused me of cheating. His voice got louder and louder until he was screaming. Then he punched the wall next to my head, his fist going straight through the drywall. I stood there frozen, heart hammering, terrified. The next morning he cried, brought me roses, said he'd been stressed at work, that he'd never do it again. I believed him because I wanted to, because admitting what was happening meant admitting I'd made a terrible mistake. But it happened again. And again. The violence escalated slowly over the next 3 years. He'd push me during arguments, grab my wrists hard enough to leave bruises, throw his phone at me when he was angry. Every time he'd apologize, every time he'd blame me for provoking him. You made me lose control. If you hadn't talked back, if you'd just listened to me. I started believing it was my fault, started walking on eggshells, monitoring my every word, trying desperately not to set him off. I stopped wearing short sleeves to hide the bruises, stopped seeing what few friends I had left because I couldn't risk them asking questions. The financial control got worse too. Garrett took over all the accounts completely. I had to ask permission to buy anything beyond basic groceries. He tracked every cent that went through my business account. I felt trapped, suffocated, like I was drowning in my own life. By the time I turned 31, I'd lost myself completely. The confident, creative woman who'd started Desert Bloom Interiors was gone. In her place was someone who flinched when her husband raised his voice, who apologized constantly for things that weren't her fault, who believed she deserved the treatment she was getting. 3 months before my 32nd birthday, everything changed. A new client walked into my design studio, a woman in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes and an air of quiet confidence. Her name was Iris Caldwell, and she wanted help redesigning her law office. We spent 2 hours going over her vision, looking at fabric samples and paint swatches. At one point, I reached across the table for a catalogue, and my sleeve rode up, exposing the bruises on my wrist. Dark purple marks in the shape of fingers where Garrett had grabbed me during an argument 3 days earlier. Iris didn't say anything, but her eyes lingered on those bruises for just a moment too long. When she left, she handed me her business card. On the back she'd written, "Call me if you ever need help." Any kind of help. I stood there holding that card, hands shaking. Part of me wanted to throw it away, pretend I hadn't seen those words, but I slipped it into my wallet instead. That night, Garrett started a fight because dinner wasn't ready when he got home. I'd been working late on a client proposal and lost track of time. He shoved me hard into the kitchen sink. I felt my hip slamming against the cabinet pane, shooting through my side. I lay there on the cold tile floor, tears streaming down my face. But something was different this time. Instead of blaming myself, instead of apologizing, I thought, I cannot live like this anymore. 2 days later, I called Iris from my office phone. We met at a coffee shop downtown during my lunch break, somewhere Garrett would never think to look for me. I told her everything. 6 years of control manipulation, isolation, violence. She listened without judgment, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Sierra, what you're describing is domestic abuse, emotional, financial, and physical." Hearing someone name it felt like being doused with cold water. This was abuse. I was being abused. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. This wasn't normal. Iris explained that she was a divorce attorney specializing in domestic violence cases. She could help me, but I had to be smart about it. Texas is a no-fault divorce state, but evidence of abuse could affect property division, restraining orders, everything. She laid out a plan. First, I needed to gather evidence. Photographs of injuries, screenshots of threatening texts, medical records documenting the abuse. Second, I needed to secure my finances, open a separate bank account, start moving small amounts of money that Garrett wouldn't notice missing. Third and most importantly, I needed witnesses and documentation of his behavior. That's when Iris suggested the cameras. In Texas, you can legally record in your own home without the other person's consent, as long as it's in common areas. The footage would be admissible in court. But won't that take forever to get anything useful, I asked. Iris smiled grimly. Not if we create the right situation. When's your birthday? June 22nd. About 3 months away. Perfect. Throw yourself a big party. Invite lots of people. Men like Garrett hate losing control of the narrative. Put him in a situation where he feels exposed, where there are witnesses he can't manipulate, and he'll snap. The idea terrified me, but it also gave me something I hadn't felt in years' hope. Over the next 3 months, I executed the plan with surgical precision. In April, I started documenting everything, every bruise photographed and dated, every threatening text message screenshot and saved. I went to my doctor about a bruise on my ribs, made sure it was noted in my medical records. I opened a new checking account at a different bank using my office address, started transferring $200 a week from our joint account, listing it as business expenses. Garrett never noticed. In May, I bought 4 hidden cameras online and had them delivered to my studio. They were designed to look like everyday objects: a desk clock, a phone charger, a picture frame, a smoke detector. I installed them strategically around the house, one in the living room angled toward the entryway, one in the kitchen on the counter, one in the dining room on a decorative shelf, one in the front hall on the console table. I tested them by starting a minor argument with Garrett, making sure the cameras captured both video and audio clearly. They did. The quality was perfect. In early June, I started planning my birthday party. I told Garrett I wanted to celebrate at home with friends and colleagues. He immediately resisted. Why do you need a big party? It's a waste of money, I pushed back gently. I'm turning 32. I want to mark the occasion. He agreed reluctantly, but I could see the tension building. He hated the idea of people he couldn't control coming into his space. Perfect. I invited 40 people, colleagues from my design work, current and former clients, and a few friends I'd lost touch with over the years, including Quinn. I knew having her there would set Garrett on edge. Everything was falling into place. The cameras were ready. The guests were invited. My lawyer was on standby. All I had to do was wait for June 22nd and trust that Garrett would do exactly what abusive men do when they feel their control slipping. They lash out. The morning of June 22nd started badly. I woke up at 7 to find Garrett already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee jaw clenched. "Good morning," I said softly. "Thank you for being here on my birthday." He looked at me with cold eyes. Where else would I be? No happy birthday, no card, no gift. I wasn't surprised. Garrett had stopped making even token efforts at affection years ago. I spent the morning preparing for the party, cleaning the house, setting up decorations, arranging where the food would go. Garrett sat on the couch watching television, offering no help and plenty of complaints. "This is too much trouble. Why do you need all these people in our house? The house is going to be destroyed by the end of the night. I have an early meeting Monday. I can't be exhausted." I kept my responses calm and measured. "It's just one evening. Please try to enjoy it." He glared at me. "I'll try, but don't expect me to entertain your friends." At 10, the caterer arrived with trays of food. Garrett watched them carry everything in, then turned to me. "How much did this cost?" "I used funds from my business account," I said carefully. "Your account? That's our money too. It's revenue from my clients, Garrett. From my work." He stood up abruptly, moving into my space, his presence threatening even without touching me. "Watch your tone with me." My heart raced. Every instinct screamed to back down, apologize, make myself small. But I remembered the cameras. They were recording right now. I needed him to show his true nature. "I'm sorry," I said, forcing my voice steady. I didn't mean to sound disrespectful. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and stalked back to the living room. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. By 5 in the evening, guests started arriving. I'd changed into a cobalt blue dress, applied makeup carefully to hide the fading bruise on my upper arm from last week. Garrett wore a button-down shirt and slacks, playing the part of the devoted husband. The first guests were colleagues from Desert Bloom. Then came clients, some I'd worked with recently, others from years past. Everyone brought wine or flowers or small gifts. The house filled with conversation and laughter. Then Quinn arrived. I hadn't seen her in almost 2 years. When she walked through the door, I felt a rush of emotion so strong I almost cried. She pulled me into a tight hug. "I've missed you so much. It's been forever, I know. I'm so sorry. Life has been hectic." She pulled back, looking into my eyes with an expression that told me she knew something was wrong. But this wasn't the time or place to discuss it. Garrett greeted Quinn with a forced smile and a handshake that lasted exactly 1 second. Then he retreated to the corner of the living room, beer in hand, watching everyone with barely concealed hostility. David Tran arrived around 5:30. He was a client who'd hired me to design his entire home office last year, and we'd developed a friendly working relationship. When he hugged me hello, I saw Garrett's expression darken across the room. The caterers had set up a beautiful spread street tacos, with all the fixings fresh guacamole chips and salsa barbecued brisket, 3 different salads. My birthday cake sat on the dining room table, 3 tiers covered in vanilla buttercream, with purple and yellow fondant flowers cascading down the side. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. People ate, drank, mingled. Several guests complimented the house, asked about my design work, shared stories and laughter. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, joy, but I kept one eye on Garrett. He stood alone, drinking steadily, his jaw tight. I recognized that look. The storm was building. At 7, someone suggested cutting the cake. Everyone gathered in the dining room, phones out to take pictures. I stood in front of the beautiful cake I'd ordered from my favorite bakery, surrounded by people who actually cared about me. "Can we sing first?" someone asked. The crowd launched into Happy Birthday, slightly off-key but enthusiastic. I smiled, genuinely happy for just a moment. Then I noticed Quinn standing beside me, noticed Garrett watching from the back of the room, his face red. After the song ended, I started to speak. "Thank you all so much for coming. This means the world to me. I've been isolated lately. Having you here reminds me that I'm not alone." The words came out before I could stop them. People clapped and cheered, several coming forward to hug me. But I saw Garrett's expression transform from angry to furious. He pushed through the crowd toward me. "Can I talk to you inside? We have guests," I said quietly. "Now!" His hand clamped around my upper arm, fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. He pulled me toward the kitchen. Several guests noticed their conversations faltering. Quinn stepped forward. "Hey, is everything okay?" Garrett spun on her. "Mind your own business." Quinn's eyes went wide. I let Garrett pull me into the kitchen, my heart pounding. This was it. The cameras were recording. I just had to stay calm. The kitchen was slightly removed from where most guests were gathered, but not completely private. Garrett shoved me against the refrigerator hard enough that my back slammed into the handle. "What the hell was that speech?" he hissed. "What do you mean I kept my voice steady, despite my racing heart?" "Isolated. You made me sound like I'm keeping you prisoner." "I didn't say anything about you, Garrett. Everyone out there is thinking it. You embarrassed me in my own house. This is my birthday," I said louder now. "And these are my friends. Your friends. The ones I told you not to invite. You don't control who I invite to my own birthday party." The words hung in the air between us. I'd never spoken to him like that before, never challenged him so directly. His face went from red to purple. "What did you just say to me?" For the first time in 6 years, I didn't back down. I said, "You don't control me." Something in him snapped. He grabbed both my shoulders, shaking me. "You ungrateful bitch. I've given you everything. This house, your pathetic little business, your entire life. You've given me nothing but fear." He shoved me hard into the refrigerator again. The impact rattled the magnets and photos hanging on it. A couple fell to the floor. I heard footsteps approaching. Quinn burst into the kitchen. Sierra. She saw Garrett's hands on me, saw the rage on his face. Get out, he roared at her. I'm not leaving her with you. This is between husband and wife. Leave. David Tran appeared behind Quinn, taking in the scene. What's going on here? Now there were 3 witnesses. Garrett was surrounded, his control of the situation slipping. He let go of me to face them, but his hands were clenched into fists. This is your fault, he said, spinning back to me. You invited these people to humiliate me. I stood up straighter, finding courage. I didn't know I had left. No one is humiliating you, Garrett. You're doing that yourself. That's when it happened. The moment I'd been planning for, even though part of me had hoped it wouldn't come. Garrett's arm came up fast. I saw his hand arcing toward my face, heard Quinn scream, saw David lunge forward trying to stop it, but too far away. The slap connected with my left cheek with a crack that echoed through the kitchen. My head snapped to the side. Pain exploded across my face, hot and sharp. I stumbled backward, catching myself on the counter. For 1 second, there was absolute silence. Quinn stood frozen, hand over her mouth. David had his phone out. Garrett's chest heaved, his hand still raised like he couldn't believe what he'd just done. Then I started laughing. It wasn't hysterical laughter. It wasn't scared laughter. It was the laughter of someone who's been waiting for exactly this moment, who's planned for it, who knows with absolute certainty that everything is about to change. I laughed as I straightened up my hand on my burning cheek. I laughed as I looked Garrett directly in the eyes. I laughed because after 6 years of abuse, I finally had him. What the hell is wrong with you? He demanded. Still smiling, I pointed to the phone charger sitting on the kitchen counter, its lens barely visible. That's a camera. His face went white. I pointed to the decorative clock on the shelf behind him. That's a camera too. I gestured toward the living room, where at least 10 guests had now gathered, drawn by the commotion. That picture frame in the living room camera. The smoke detector in the hallway, also a camera. Garrett stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You recorded me. No, Garrett. I recorded you hitting me. In our home, in front of witnesses. In Texas, where I have every legal right to record in common areas without your knowledge or consent. Quinn was looking at me with a mixture of shock and admiration. David already had his phone to his ear. Could you still call the police? I asked him calmly. I'd like to file a report. Absolutely, David said, speaking into the phone. Yes, I need to report a domestic assault. Garrett's expression cycled through disbelief rage and finally fear. Sierra, wait. Let's talk about this. Talk, I kept my voice level. You mean like we've talked for the past 6 years with your fists and your threats? Quinn stepped between us. Don't you dare come near her. More guests crowded into the kitchen and the doorway. At least 15 people now witnessed the aftermath, saw the red handprint blooming on my cheek, heard Garrett's desperate attempts to backtrack. Baby, please, I'm sorry. I lost control. It won't happen again. You're absolutely right, I said. It won't. Because I'm done. Done. What does that mean? I pulled out my phone, opened the app, connected to the cameras. With a few taps, I pulled up the footage from the kitchen camera, time-stamped just minutes ago. The video showed everything: Garrett grabbing me, shoving me, and then that slap crystal clear with perfect audio. I turned the screen toward him. This video is already backed up to the cloud. My lawyer has a copy, and in about 30 seconds the police will be here to see the live version. His face went from white to grey. Your lawyer, did you really think I'd throw a party with 40 witnesses without a plan? He reached for me. Sierra, if you show that to anyone, I'll lose everything. My job, my reputation. Good. I held his gaze without flinching. Maybe you'll learn what it feels like to lose everything, like you made me feel every single day for 6 years. His expression hardened, the mask slipping back into place. If you do this, I'll make your life hell. You already did. I smiled without humour. The difference is, now I have proof. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Garrett seemed to shrink, finally understanding that his world was collapsing around him. The guests parted as two police officers appeared at the front door, let in by someone I couldn't see. Officer Martinez and Officer Banks, according to their name tags, took in the scene with professional assessment. Officer Martinez, a woman in her 40s, approached me first. "Ma'am, we received a call about a domestic assault." "Yes," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "My husband struck me. I have multiple witnesses and video evidence." Officer Martinez examined my face, where I knew the red mark was darkening to a bruise. She took photos with a camera from her belt. Officer Banks spoke with David and Quinn taking their statements. Within 20 minutes, they'd interviewed everyone who'd witnessed the incident. Everyone told the same story. Garrett had been aggressive, had grabbed me, had slapped me hard across the face, while 3 people watched. "Ma'am, do you have that video evidence?" Officer Martinez asked. I pulled it up on my phone, showed her the footage. She watched it twice, her expression hardening. Then she turned to her partner. Officer Banks approached Garrett, who'd been standing in the corner watching his life fall apart. "Sir, you're under arrest for assault causing bodily injury, family violence. This is insane." "It was just a slap." "Assault is assault," Officer Banks said flatly. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As he read Garrett his rights, Martinez turned back to me. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight?" "This is my house," I said. "He's the one who needs to leave." She nodded approvingly. "We're taking him to the station. You should file for an emergency protective order first thing Monday morning." I already have a lawyer prepared to do exactly that. "Smart woman." They led Garrett toward the door in handcuffs. He tried to struggle to protest, but they held him firmly. As they passed me, he looked at me with pure hatred. "You're going to regret this, Sierra." I met his eyes one last time. "The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner." The door closed behind them. The house fell silent, except for the sound of the police car pulling away. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by witnesses, my cheek throbbing, my heart pounding, and felt something I hadn't experienced in 6 years. Freedom. The guests began leaving shortly after the police drove away with Garrett. Each person stopped to hug me, to offer support, to slip me their phone number, with whispered promises of help if I needed it. By 11, only Quinn remained. "I'm not leaving you alone tonight," she said firmly. "I'm okay, really. No, you're not. And that's fine, but you're not staying in this house by yourself." While Quinn made tea, I walked through the rooms, seeing them differently now. This had been my prison for so long. Now, finally, it could just be a house. My house. A knock at the door startled us both. I opened it to find Iris Caldwell standing on my porch, still dressed in the cocktail dress she'd worn to the party. "Iris," I said, surprised. "I didn't realize you were still here." "I wasn't. I went home, but I couldn't sleep." She stepped inside, all business now. "We need to talk strategy while everything is fresh." The 3 of us sat in the living room, the same room where just hours ago I'd celebrated my birthday. Now we were planning my escape from a 6-year nightmare. "First things first," Iris said, pulling out her laptop. "How do you feel? Do you need medical attention?" "My face hurts, but I'm okay otherwise. Tomorrow you go to your doctor. We need medical documentation of the injury. Photos alone aren't enough." Quinn brought me an ice pack. I pressed it against my burning cheek. Iris continued. "Garrett will be released tomorrow morning, most likely. He'll have to post bail, probably around $2,000. When he gets out, he's going to be angry. We need to file an emergency protective order first thing Monday before he's released. What will that do? It'll prohibit him from coming within 200 feet of you, from contacting you directly, and from entering this house. You'll be safe. What about the house itself? Can he force me to sell it? Texas is a community property state, so technically you both own it. But given that he assaulted you here and that you run your business from your home office, we can argue that you should retain the house. He makes more money than you do. He can find another place to live." The next morning I went to my doctor's office despite it being Sunday. Dr. Sarah Kim, my physician, agreed to see me on emergency basis. She documented the bruise on my face, took measurements and photos for medical records. She also noted the older bruises on my arms and ribs marks I'd tried to hide for months. "How long has this been going on?" she asked, gently. "Years," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." She squeezed my hand. "You're doing the right thing by leaving." Monday morning, Iris filed the emergency protective order. We appeared before Judge Patricia Lawson, a stern woman in her 60s who'd seen too many cases like mine. Garrett was there with his attorney Raymond Cole, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. Cole tried to downplay what happened. "Your Honor, this was an isolated incident. My client deeply regrets his actions. He's willing to attend anger management counseling." Iris stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit video evidence of the assault." She played the footage for the judge. The courtroom went silent as everyone watched Garrett grab me, shake me, shove me, and then slap me hard enough that I nearly fell. The audio caught everything. His words, my attempts to de-escalate Quinn's scream, David calling 911. Judge Lawson's face was granite. "Mr. Hayes, this video shows a clear pattern of aggressive, violent behavior culminating in assault. Combined with witness testimony and medical documentation, I'm granting a 1-year protective order. You are not to contact Mrs. Hayes except through your attorneys. You are not to approach within 200 feet of her person, her home, or her place of business." Garrett started to protest. "Your Honor, that's my house too. It's community property, which will be resolved in divorce proceedings. For now, Mrs. Hayes has the right to safe housing. You'll need to find alternative accommodations." The gavel came down with finality. As we left the courtroom, Garrett stared at me with undisguised hatred. Iris positioned herself between us, guiding me quickly to her car. Over the next month, I filed for divorce, citing insupportability and domestic violence. Iris requested that I retain the house, my car, and half of our savings. Garrett's attorney fought back, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Then things got worse for Garrett, in ways I hadn't anticipated. Word spread through his company about his arrest. The HR department launched an investigation and discovered he'd had multiple complaints filed against him by female employees over the years. Complaints that had been swept under the rug because Garrett was a top performer. Now, with a domestic violence arrest on his record, the company couldn't ignore it anymore. They suspended him pending further investigation. Without his income, he struggled to pay for both his attorney and his new apartment rent. His brother had to lend him money just to get by. Meanwhile, my business actually grew. Word spread in the design community about what I'd done, how I'd documented everything and gotten out safely. Other women started reaching out, asking for advice, sharing their own stories. I became inadvertently connected to a network of domestic violence survivors, and several became clients wanting to redesign their spaces after leaving their abusers. 3 months after that birthday party, we were back in front of Judge Lawson for the divorce proceedings. Garrett looked haggard, worn down by legal fees and public shame. His attorney had advised him not to fight too hard, knowing they'd lose. Judge Lawson reviewed all the evidence, the videos, the medical records, the witness statements, the police report, the protective order violation when Garrett tried to contact me through Facebook. She looked at Garrett with open disgust. "This is one of the clearest cases of domestic abuse I have seen in my 20 years on the bench." Her ruling was swift, divorce granted. I would keep the house, though I'd have to pay Garrett $150,000 over 3 years, representing his equity share. We'd each keep our own vehicles. We'd split the savings account, and Garrett would pay my legal fees, which totaled nearly $20,000. Garrett looked like he wanted to argue, but his attorney put a hand on his arm, shaking his head. They both knew fighting would only make things worse. As I left the courthouse with Iris, I felt lighter than I had in years. "That's it?" I asked. "It's really over?" Iris smiled. "The legal part is. The healing part will take longer. But yes, you're free. We stood on the courthouse steps in the September sunshine, just 3 months since that birthday party, 3 months since Garrett had hit me in front of 40 witnesses, and I'd laughed knowing I had him on camera. You did it, Iris said quietly. We did it, I corrected, pulling her into a hug. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, life had settled into a new rhythm. It was March now, almost a year since I'd started planning my escape. I still lived in the Hyde Park house, but it looked completely different. I'd repainted every room in bright, cheerful colours, replaced furniture that reminded me of Garrett, hung new artwork, made it truly mine. Desert Bloom Interiors was thriving. I'd hired 2 additional designers to help handle the increased workload. My client base had doubled. Turned out, getting free from an abusive relationship gave me creative energy I'd forgotten I possessed. My social life had blossomed too. Quinn and I had lunch every week now, making up for lost time. I'd reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage, made new friends through a support group for domestic violence survivors that I attended every Tuesday evening. My mum Gloria visited from California at least once a month. Our relationship had grown stronger than ever. She blamed herself for not seeing the signs of abuse earlier, but I reminded her that Garrett had been careful to hide his true nature from everyone except me. I hadn't dated anyone, wasn't ready for that yet, but I'd started going to therapy, working through 6 years of trauma. My therapist said I was making remarkable progress. I heard about Garrett occasionally through mutual acquaintances. He'd lost his job at the real estate company after the investigation concluded, found work at a smaller firm for significantly less money, had to move to a cheap apartment in the suburbs. Most of his friends had distanced themselves once they learned the truth about how he'd treated me. His sister Jenna had reached out to me with a tearful apology. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner," she'd said. "Mum and I believe you. We're here if you need anything." I didn't hate Garrett. Hate required emotional energy I didn't want to spend on him anymore. I felt empty when I thought about him, like he was just a character from a book I'd finished reading and put back on the shelf. One Saturday afternoon in late March, I was sitting on my front porch with a cup of tea, enjoying the mild Texas spring, when a delivery truck pulled up. The driver brought me a small package addressed in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a card with a drawing on the front, a simple crayon sketch of what might have been a birthday cake, though it was hard to tell. The message inside read, "Dear Ms. Sierra, my name is Emma. I'm 12 years old. My mum told me about you, about how you were brave and got away from someone who hurt you. My mum left my dad last year because he hurt her too. She said reading about your story online helped her be brave. I just wanted to say thank you for being brave first, because you helped my mum, and my mum is helping other ladies now too." The card was signed with a heart and Emma's name in careful cursive. I sat there on my porch reading that card over and over, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, but of gratitude. My story, my pain, my calculated escape had helped someone else find their own way out. That's when I understood that everything I'd been through, as horrible as it was, had meaning, not because suffering builds character or any of that nonsense people say, but because I'd turned my experience into something that could help others. I'd documented everything, planned carefully, and escaped safely, and now other women were following that blueprint to freedom. If you've made it this far in my story, I want to leave you with some thoughts. A lot of people ask me how I had the courage to set up those cameras, to throw that party, to essentially trap Garrett into showing his true nature in front of witnesses. The truth is, I didn't feel courageous at all. I felt desperate. Desperate enough to spend 3 months planning to carefully gather evidence, to risk everything on the chance that he'd lose control at exactly the right moment. But sometimes desperation and courage look the same from the outside. If you're in a situation like I was, please know that you deserve better. You deserve safety. You deserve respect. You deserve a life without fear. I don't care what your partner says, what excuses they make, how much they apologize after they hurt you. Love doesn't come with bruises. Love doesn't require you to walk on eggshells. Love doesn't isolate you from everyone who cares about you. If you're planning to leave, please be smart about it. Leaving is the most dangerous time for victims of domestic violence. Have a safety plan. Tell someone you trust. Gather evidence. Document everything. In many states, you can legally record in your own home. Check your local laws. Take photos of injuries. Save threatening messages. Keep a journal with dates and details, and if possible, get legal help before you leave. Find a domestic violence attorney or contact a local shelter. They can guide you through the process safely. That slap at my birthday party changed everything. Not because it was the first time Garrett had hurt me. It wasn't. Not even because it was the worst thing he'd done to me. It wasn't that either. That slap mattered because it happened in front of 40 witnesses and 4 hidden cameras. It was the piece of evidence that made everything else I'd documented impossible to deny or explain away. When people ask why I laughed, why I didn't cry or scream or collapse, I tell them the truth. I laughed because I knew that slap wasn't the end of my story. It was the end of his control over me. That slap was Garrett's biggest mistake and my final piece of evidence. His hand hit my face, but my planning hit back harder. He tried to break me one last time, not realizing I'd already decided to break free. The cameras captured everything. The witnesses saw everything. The police documented everything. And the court believed everything. For 6 years, Garrett told me I was worthless, that no one would believe me, that I was lucky he stayed with me. Turns out, I didn't need him to stay. I needed him to show the world exactly who he was. And once he did, once there was undeniable proof, his house of lies collapsed. I'm not going to lie and say everything is perfect now. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still flinch when someone raises their voice. I still catch myself apologizing for things that aren't my fault, then have to consciously correct the behavior. Trauma doesn't disappear just because you escape the person who caused it. But I'm healing. Every day, I'm more myself. The woman I was before Garrett combined with the strength I developed surviving him. I'm running a successful business on my own terms. I'm surrounded by people who genuinely care about me. I'm learning to trust again, to take up space, to believe I deserve good things. And most importantly, I'm free. So here's what I want you to take away from my story. If you're being abused, it's not your fault. You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. What's happening to you isn't normal or acceptable, no matter what your abuser says. You can get out. It won't be easy. It might take months of planning like it did for me, but you can do it. You're stronger than you think. You're smarter than they've convinced you that you are. You deserve a life where you're not afraid. And if you're reading this because you know someone who might be in an abusive relationship, please don't judge them for staying. You don't know what threats have been made, what they've been convinced of, how isolated they've become. Just let them know you're there, that they can come to you when they're ready. Sometimes that lifeline is the difference between staying trapped and finding the courage to leave. Now I want to hear from you. Have you or someone you know ever had to plan carefully to leave a dangerous situation? What advice would you give to someone who's trapped in an abusive relationship? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it. You never know who in your life might need to hear that escape is possible. And subscribe to this channel for more true stories of survival and strength. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for bearing witness to what happened and for being part of the community that says no to domestic violence. Remember, you're not alone. There are people who will believe you, who will help you, who will stand beside you when you're ready to stand up for yourself. Stay strong, stay safe, and know that freedom is worth fighting for.